Previously on Yu-Gi-Oh! CG, we took a look at the infamous riots at the Tokyo Dome and the group of promotional cards involved. It was a splotch on the game's history, but it did not mark the end of times, because on that same day, August 26, 1999, the next booster set was released. Booster 4. Once the dust had settled and people got over not receiving their Frog of the Jams, the Yu-Gi-Oh! Fans realized what they should have gotten excited over all this time. To preface it, B4 made the Tokyo Dome a distant memory. The power of low-level cards entered a new age entirely. Axe Raider is immediately stronger than Rogue Doll, being a result of the game's natural progression. This would have been normal if it hadn't been for a few more new beaters. Lojin, the Mystical Genie of the Lamp, and Giant Red Sea Snake are one step ahead of the curve with their 1800 attack stats. Suddenly, not only Rogue Doll and their 1600 kin were outdated, but so were a good chunk of the mid-level monsters too. For that matter, the addition of these three monsters dissipated the concept of sub-2000 mid-mons. I know what you're thinking. Axe Raider once again got screwed out of meta viability. He got the axe. And even that wasn't enough for B4 to bolster the card pool with, for Konami decided to pull a Super Saiyan 2 and introduce Mechanical Chaser with a whopping 1850 attack. It's only 50 higher than Lojin, but Chaser can beat it nonetheless. Even if B4 introduced just Axe Raider and Lojin, Rogue Doll would still be somewhat playable, but now with the two new additional 1800 attackers and an 1851, Rogue Doll was left in the dust. And the funny thing is that Chaser wasn't even the strongest low-level beater in the set. Konami went even further beyond with Gemini Elf, a 4-star 1900 attack spellcaster. It's not even close. This was the new low-level boss monster. It was only 100 points less than Curse of Dragon. Quite frankly, it set the bar and branded it. Even by today's standards, is it rare to see a vanilla with 2k attack, making 1900 that gold standard of what it means to be a normal beater, which makes it that much weirder that Elf was released only a few months into the game, in the same set that was already breaking attack potency boundaries. The power creep throughout this early period has been by the hundreds, but now it was by 300. We were starting to see power inflation with the official rules, but the expert rules just said, hold my beer. Keep in mind the time period. Nothing was set in stone when it came to the stat ceiling. For all the duelists knew, there could be a time when a 4-star monster would reach Summon Skull territory, or dare you even mention Blue Eyes. Thankfully that never happened, but what if? I'm unsure why Konami felt the need to make this move at this point in time. They could have just released Axe Raider and Lojin and called it a day. While having no effect, Gemini Elf shook the game more than Premium Pack ever could. By the way, if you're enjoying this video, consider doing all of that YouTube engagement stuff or even becoming a Janjo patron for as little as $2 a month. Your help is greatly appreciated. And if you don't, Will Ospreay will give you the Tiger Driver 91. Let's avoid that, shall we? Do you know what's even wilder? B4 had more power cards than just the beaters. Enter Graceful Charity, a magic card that lets you draw 3, then discard 2. In many ways, it's better than Pot of Greed, for it allows you to dig through your deck more and reshape your hand, possibly even setting up Monster Reborn plays like with Blue Eyes. One thing to remember is that at the time, there were no resurrection restrictions, meaning you could dump and revive a perfectly ultimate Great Moth. Regardless of which draw you think is better, it's up there for the best draw cards in the game's history. And that's really all the cards you wanted from B4. Sure, there were other interesting cards, such as White Hole and Call of the Grave, which negate Dark Hole and Monster Reborn respectively. A reasonable, yet poor way to deal with the power cards. You also had new effect monsters in Cockroach Knight, Karakuri Spider, Swordsman from a Distant Land, the Wicked Worm Beast, and Zone Eater, but nothing too notable, save for Worm Beast when it comes to some rogue strategy in early TCG. We're a far cry from the days of old, where cards like Faithbird, Dark Titan of Terror, or Big Insect may have seen play. I mean, B4 introduced a line of mid-level 1800 monsters that maybe would have seen some experimentation had Summon Skull not come out in Volume 4. And even still, we got Turtle Bird, which just slightly outclassed even the 1800 mons. In some ways, it feels like Konami just needed to throw away a backlog of card designs, and here you go. B4 deeply affected the meta. A new generation of beaters emerged, and digging through your deck greatly fastened thanks to the recent release of Magician of Faith, of whom could recur Charity or Greed. Don't forget that the two magic cards were both unlimited. This is great for the lucky duelist. However, if you don't draw into your cards earlier than your opponent, you would be at a serious disadvantage. Turboing through your deck to simply set a faith meant for a lack of strategy as well. So suddenly you have a simplified format defined by a draw resource system. Tell me the difference between this and modern play. Also, I need to remind you, per these booster overviews, that all these cards were in a randomized vending machine, meaning they were tougher to get than the volume sets. But at least the key cards were all common, with the rares being saved for the Tribal Destruction reprints, which, in regards to that, I'm sure duelists at the time would have preferred reprints of bigger cards, but I digress. Though I must admit, looking back in retrospect, the set was awesome. It's not defined by one or two cards. You get a lot of strong cards that would define early TCG Yu-Gi-Oh! Wicked Worm Beast and Lojin and Yugi Kaiba format, Gemini Elf and Android format, and Graceful Charity for the first few years in general. It's fascinating because a lot of these OCG sets have been ultimately lackluster. I mean, we actually got a couple of traps in here, which was not a guarantee in these early sets. Also, decks could have a solid mix of effect monsters and strong beaters without feeling too lopsided. On top of that, we got two new fusions, which, while they needed 3 materials making them unplayable, at least Konami was showing that fusions with higher than 2k attack were going to be more common moving forward. Though let's hope that the high attack wasn't coinciding with the 3 fusion materials, because that would be a really bad choice for them to make. Perhaps it's just me looking at the positives here. But at the time, yes, B4 was less power creep and more power jump. It was defined by a powerful magic card and the low-class, high-attack family. The heavy additions made the card-ass pulls all the more annoying for duelists. Much like the starter box format, the meta depended on if you had these new cards or not. And maybe that's why they added so many strong beaters, so you had more chance to get into them. As such, B4 was generally seen as a horrifying period, all things considered. Decks boiled down to either a good stuff build, a revival build, or a turbo build with Skelengel, a far cry from what would have been the ideal deck had power creep been in check. Dark Equip, get that out of here. Needless to say, it was a delicate period for the game's health, considering the instant inflation of power and speed. But what do you all think? Was B4 as game-changing as many believe? What was your favorite card from the set? Don't get too comfortable, because what comes next may change your heart. Change of heart. The next set has change of heart. Can I be any more clear about this? Change of heart, change of heart, change of heart. Okay, I'm done.